Welcome to this new video series that we're doing called Elevate. We're going to be looking at Psalm 23. And we're going to spend the next 7 weeks here just looking at this. And I'll explain why it's 7 weeks in just a moment. But this series kind of came out of the idea of the fact that there was something that happened in my life that made me realize that familiarity with the Bible can be sometimes a little bit of a problem. You see, my wife and I, way back in November of 2015, so this has been, 18 months or so in the making here. I just never felt right. It just never seemed to fit on what I wanted to do and where I wanted to put it. I started a blog and I wanted to see about putting it on there, but I couldn't quite get that right either. So I decided that I was going to give it a try when we started doing videos. And so here we are. But it came out of the fact that back in November of 2015, we were sitting there and discussing our things to do finishing up school. As you know, school kind of gets rough toward the end of a semester. If you've ever been in any kind of school, high school, whatever, it doesn't matter. And so I got thinking about it, and I was like, we have to do this, I have to do that, this report, this paper, this test. And then I was like, oh, and by the way, I've got to teach the 4th and 5th grade students at church the next weekend. And so when I thought about that, I was kind of like, but it's probably the Christmas story, and I'm kind of familiar with that. And so being familiar with the Christmas story, it should be easy. But I didn't realize exactly that God was going to be kind of like, hey, yeah, it's going to be easy? Really? Is that really what it's going to be? Okay. Well, here, how about this? And he just spent the next week exactly telling me what the Christmas story was all about. And it was probably one of the best lessons that I did. So being familiar with something, especially the Bible, can be a little bit rocky because we get so familiar with it. And we know this story, we do that, and we do this. And he's going to tell that one. I know that story. And we start to kind of, as humans and as people, we turn off our brain. And we're kind of like, I've heard that story before. I know all about it. I could quote it with him. And so this passage in Psalm 23, being familiar, it's said by Max Lucado. It said that it's written on hospital walls and it's hung there, it's framed in hallways, it's quoted by kids, it's whispered by dying people, it's kind of carved in there on prison walls. People are familiar with these 117 words. People know what they are, people know what they're about. They're used in movies and in books, and they're used by everybody and people. And so these words can be familiar, whether you go to church or you don't go to church, whether you believe in God or you don't. You know some portion of Psalm 23. So I want to encourage us as we go along with this to kind of look at this with fresh eyes, to not kind of sit there and oh, I know this psalm, oh, I know this part of it. Just kind of empty our mind of this verse and act like we've never heard it before and act like this is the very first time that we've seen it. So in doing that, and I was preparing to get ready for this video, I got to thinking about the first verse. And we're going to be going verse by verse here, just kind of taking a look at each verse individually, except for the first verse. Because I couldn't get past, the Lord is my shepherd. That's the very first 5 words of this psalm. But it sets up, and everything in this psalm kind of reverts back and kind of goes back to the Lord is my shepherd. You could almost put in the Lord is my this, the Lord is my that, as you go through this psalm. So we're going to be doing that as we go along here. But the Lord is my shepherd. And when we look at the writer of the Psalms, most of them, if not all of them, are written by David. In the high points and the low points of life, some Psalms he's very happy and praising God and rejoicing in the fact that God is alive and well and all of that. But then there's another part of it where he's saying, oh, woe is me, and my enemies are everywhere, and save me, and why are you so far away from me? And then let everything that has breath praise the Lord. So, David's kind of up and down, and David's an emotional roller coaster. And he led a tough and hard life to figure that out. So, but I want to say here for this, the Lord is my shepherd. And in saying that, looking at those words, David was a shepherd. We see in the very first parts of his story in 1 Samuel 16, he's called from the fields from tending the flocks when Samuel comes looking for him. He comes to the house of Jesse looking for a new king because God has said nope to Saul, and now he's looking for a new king. But David doesn't become king right away. But Samuel goes to the house of Jesse and he's looking for him, and he's like, but don't look at outward appearance, because they already did that. Saul was big and muscular and ooh, warrior, king. Everything that Israel thought they wanted in a king, but he turned out to be a total boogerhead, and nobody could actually control him, and he wound up being the opposite of what Israel wanted and needed. So Samuel's looking for this new king. Jesse parades all his sons through there like it's some kind of show, and Samuel's like, is that all? And they're like, no, there's just David. He's out there in the field, but he's scrawny and little, and nobody, really, David? I said I want to see all your sons. And so they send for David, and David comes back. And when David comes back, Samuel's like, yep, that's the one. And God's like, anoint him as next king. And David was a little boy at that time, but he was a shepherd. So when he writes the words, the Lord is my shepherd, he's kind of writing about a shepherd from a shepherd's standpoint, but he's not writing about any shepherd, he's writing about the best shepherd ever. And as we see these different words, the protection, the guidance, the rest and everything that's in here, David is writing these words about God from his experience of being a shepherd. And it's really awesome as we're kind of going to go through this verse. But I couldn't get past these first 5 words without kind of stepping in there and explaining that just a little bit. And we're going to continue with the rest of this verse in the next video. But I just want to encourage you to kind of join us for the rest of this video series next 7 weeks, and just kind of get into this psalm with us as we look through each one of these individual verses. So in saying that, kind of like if you want to keep up with this, you can like the Facebook page, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you can kind of keep up with these videos in that way. So I encourage you to do that, but I also encourage you to look at this as we go with a brand new look and a brand new mind.